Yeah, I'm going to start just by asking, I mean, I was just wondering about how you guys, when you first got involved in this project, did you get the chance to meet the band much beforehand? And if so, and afterwards, I'm also interested in getting their reaction if you're quite nervous about hearing what they actually had to say about the movie.
Yeah. We didn't meet them in the casting process. The first time I met Bryan actually was when we had started rehearsals, and we'd been rehearsing for about a week, the three of us, you, me and Ben. And it was the first day that Rami had joined us. So the first day all four of us were together as a band, Bryan May decided he wanted to turn up and not only just come and say hello, but to see a run through of the Live Aid concert. So it was really pretty intimidating. But he was so supportive and so kind of encouraging from day one. It was amazing.
Yeah, and then really at the end, when he saw the cut, we didn't know he was seeing it. But it was just so important to us that they felt like we did their legacy justice, their story justice. And so right after he saw it, he actually wrote us all individual emails telling us how proud he was of us and how much it meant to him, all the work that we had put in, and how brilliant he thought the acting was. And that was like the biggest sigh of relief. And it was just like, no matter what happens with this movie, if it's successful or whatever it is, like to have his seal of approval was the thing that mattered most to us, no doubt.
One of the most interesting things I thought about this was your character's quite complex relationship with Freddie Mercury. I'm just wondering about that, and what did you kind of perceive that to be? Because it's quite a difficult thing to put your finger on, isn't it? That they're sort of the dynamic between those two.
It is, and I think that's kind of the most beautiful thing about it. How I keep using the word undefinable, but how undefinable it is, and how modern, I suppose, their attitudes towards their relationship was. I feel like we're now in a headspace where everyone is trying to be slightly more open-minded, and they're finally waking up to the idea that sexuality doesn't define you and is also a very fluid thing, as are humans. And I think the way Freddie and Mary handled, I mean, from a third-party perspective, the kind of transition throughout their relationship was because of a very solid foundation of love and respect that allowed them to be so kind of open and pragmatic. But I think we could learn a lot from that.
Because Rami just walked past me in the corridor, and I didn't look at him as the man who played Freddie Mercury.
Nope.
They feel like two completely different people. Was it like that a bit on set when you were there? Did it feel like that was just Freddie Mercury?
Totally. And so then when you see Rami Malek in the trailer, the makeup trailer at the end of the day, without everything, it's just like there's a stranger on our set. And then you come to work and it's Freddie, and it's like, well, that's a person I know well.
Because I mean, are you able, just generally in your career, are you able to sort of recognise when someone's is brilliant on set? Does that have to happen when you see the finished product, or can you be in a scene just going, God, this guy's really?
Yeah, and I think we could all see it on set when, I mean, he, like you say, when you see in the film what we saw on set, he just absolutely disappeared, and was, totally Freddie. And it was incredible. It was amazing to have that energy. But yeah, you were very much aware that something very special was happening.
And do you find that when you listen to Queen, you listen to it slightly differently to how you ever once did?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because we've lived those songs. You know, you can take those songs for granted because we hear them so often and they're kind of omnipresent in that sense. But really, to know what it takes to construct them. Like, I remember you and I thinking We Are the Champions, and not really ever having properly listened to that music, but breaking it down into bass line, guitar line, piano, and just realising the construction of it's so genius, really.
Yeah.
And that goes for all of the songs that we did in the film, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way, and especially like even knowing like who wrote them and where they were in their lives when they wrote them and what the band was going through when they wrote them, it just gives us like a whole other meaning to everything that we're sort of doing. And then and you know, after I was done with this film, like I went on this little road trip, and all I did was listen to Queen because I wanted to hear all the songs that we didn't touch on or the things that I didn't know. Like, it was just weird. You would think I would be sick of it, but instead it was like I just had this whole new appreciation and heard the songs in a completely different way.
Yeah, definitely. A lot more. And also, just with better perspective of context has really impacted the way I listen, because now I have a greater understanding of kind of how, why, and where the songs came about, who wrote them, and the time in which it was all happening. So it's kind of like a behind the scenes version of listening to it. It's fun.
I'm assuming you must have sort of really formed quite a sort of an affinity between the four of you in the sense that...
I can't stand the man. Honestly, this is awkward.
I can't believe how close he's sitting. There's so much couch.
Because I was wondering, I mean, when you're... I was thinking when you're sort of on that stage in front of all those people, being in a band like that is something only those four people can ever understand, isn't it? No matter, we could never quite understand what it must have felt like to be those four people in that moment. So I guess in some ways you must have sort of experienced that mildly as a four in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we the first thing we shot was the Live Aid sequence, and at the end of having done all of the coverage of each particular song, we did a run through of the whole 20-minute set uninterrupted, going from one song to the next and feeling the build of energy and adrenaline from one song to the next. And at the end of it, we took our bows and went backstage, and I do remember so vividly just like holding each other and just looking at each other with this like pure like joy and adrenaline and energy, and we just thought we really felt like a band at that moment. It really forged us together, and so we had I think a taste of what that must have been like. Obviously, you know, playing in front of 70,000 people, singing your songs back to you, and really creating that sound and having it come through your body must just be the most incredible feeling. But that's the beauty of being an actor. You do get a taste of what that might have been like.
It was sort of cool too because we did Live Aid first, but then we did some reshoots and just did little pickups of Live Aid, and it was almost nostalgic then for me to like remember some of the choreography and moments where we connected, and like doing those again together just felt like it was like another appreciation of being like, wow, how cool that we got to actually perform Live Aid and do that entire set, and to be looking back on it now and you know, just making eye contact with each other, with Rami or with Ben or whatever it is, you definitely feel that sort of pride in knowing that like what we had accomplished with this film. It was pretty great.
Yeah, because I'm not going to ask you what your favourite Queen song is, because I'm sure a lot of people have asked you what your favourite Queen song is. But I was wondering, what's the biggest surprise Queen song in the sense that one you didn't really know much going into this movie and you've since developed a really strong relationship with?
I mean, of course, Love of My Life is going to be one of those, but I guess songs like Lily of the Valley and more kind of poetic and intimate songs, because I was much more familiar with the anthems that we all know, that we hear all the time. And also then just paying attention to the intricacies of those songs that you kind of take for granted, but then as soon as you've heard about the intense processes or the wild stories behind the songs, you have a greater appreciation for every layer that went into the creation of it.
I don't know, I haven't know too much about it, but did you get the chance to meet the real Mary at all? Or
I didn't, unfortunately, as much as I would have loved to, but which also then added another weight of worry and pressure, because of course she's spoken very openly in many interviews, so that was my kind of jumping off point, but also the want to respect the privacy that she has, the kind of boundaries that she has set up, so to tell the most honest story while also not intruding too far.
Yeah, because I guess there's a whole added element of pressure, isn't it, when you're playing someone that you know is going to sit down and watch themselves being portrayed back to them on screen. I mean, that must be quite nerve-wracking in many ways.
Absolutely terrifying. It's so uncomfortable, and that's the main thing. I just hope she's like somewhat comfortable with how much we've shown, that it just, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that'll ever be the most comfortable experience for anyone, but fingers crossed.
Because I guess in some ways maybe it's good not to meet them beforehand, because then there is a kind of disconnect between what's on the page and the real person. You can treat it more like a character in a movie. And
I think sometimes that is absolutely the case, whereas with this, just because some of the subjects we were dealing with were so sensitive and so personal, that it would have been nice to just kind of at least know her kind of take on it. Now, of course, that would be with hindsight, but also just kind of the way that we had Brian May on set, and so we always felt safe telling his story, of course, because he's there to give his nod of approval. So just to get a nod of approval would have been less stressful.
I was wondering too, just quickly, obviously, of this well-noted, documented, there was a change of director. I mean, not many actors have to go through that. What was that like to be on a movie where, towards the end, suddenly someone else came in with, I'm assuming, even just subtly, a different sort of vision? I mean, was that, because I remember when I did the interviews for the Solo movie as well, they had a similar thing. It must be quite surreal in some ways to turn up on set and suddenly someone else is there sort of telling you what to do in certain scenes.
Well, it's something that you kind of, if you've been in a long-running TV series, for instance, you do that on a regular basis. You're always dealing with new directors, but you're telling the same story and as the same character. So we're used to it as actors, and equally at that stage in the shoot, we were probably about 2/3 in, I would say, something like that. Maybe more, but we knew who our characters were. We knew what was left to do, and we knew what it entailed. So we were pretty grounded and steady at that point. So it really didn't rock the boat at all.
Yeah, and credit to Dexter to come in and make sure that he knew what the movie was and what we were doing and understood all of our characters and was able and was willing to let us sort of play and have fun and sort of take the reins, a little bit for who we were.
Yeah.
And so it was actually, it was a little worrisome at first, but actually it ended up being great.
Also, the shoot is just the tip of the iceberg with this film. Is the evolution of this film was 8-10 years in the making, and the person or the people who were present from day one, Graham King, Dennis O'Sullivan, and they gave us that continuity throughout the whole thing, including when we had the change of director.
Well, Dexter's a safe pair of hands, isn't he? So.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Brilliant.
I think actually in this case, Rami had set the tone. Rami set the tone on set every day and the kind of energy on set every day. So because that was constant throughout the entire shoot, that was a really powerful constant to have. And Dexter has this brilliant, very Freddie energy, actually, and being an actor himself, the way that you approach scenes, especially the scenes that we started with him, such as the engagement and breakup, it's just very different talking to someone who is also in an actor's mind. So it was helpful, but we were just lucky with the leaders that we had who, like Rami, who kind of maintained that something.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey,